الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So inshallah, today we will be going through some of the basic foundations in the religion. One of the books that we will be relying on is the book by the name Adab al-Mashi ila-Salah. This is a book that deals with the topic of the etiquettes that are required for a person when they come to the masjid and Salah itself. It is one of the books that we will be relying on throughout these classes. So, to begin, the author of the book, he says, after Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, he says it is from the Sunnah that when a person leaves his house to go to the masjid, that they leave with tahara. This is a sort of forgotten hadith that many of us today, when we leave our houses to come to the masjid, we often think, I'll make wudu when I go there. I'll make wudu at the masjid. Whereas, if you look into the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you will actually find that making wudu at home and leaving, it is the way that the Prophet ﷺ used to do it and his companions. This is not to say that making wudu at the masjid is haram by any means, but it is more virtuous and better for a person when they're heading to the masjid that they leave with wudu. And the author also mentions the dua that is said when leaving the house. And this dua, which is a dua that we teach the children in the madrasa, and it is a good and simple dua to learn if you have not learned it before. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, من قال يعني إذا خرج من بيته بسم الله توكلت على الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله يقال له كفيت ووقيت. That whoever mentions this dua, saying Bismillah توكلت على الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله, when they leave their house, then the Prophet ﷺ is saying that it will be said that you have been protected. And also in some narrations it mentions that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the shayateen will not come close to such a person. By saying such a simple dua, Bismillah توكلت على الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. And in some narrations there are other dua, but this is one of the most simple ones to be said, and this is in an authentic hadith that the scholars have mentioned that it is authentic. Another point that is mentioned is when a person walks towards the masjid. I know many of us today, we drive because of the distance to the masjid. But if someone has the opportunity, the chance, it is actually better to walk to the masjid. And it mentions that walking to the masjid should be done with sakina, with tranquility and peace. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا سَمِعْتُمُ الْإِقَامَةَ فَامْشُوا وَعَلَيْكُمُ السَّكِينَةِ, that when you hear the iqamah, then walk and walk with this sakina, this tranquility, and not, in other narrations it mentions that rushing to the salah, it is not recommended. It is not something that the Prophet ﷺ would recommend. And the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning in this hadith, even if you come late, let's say you logically thinking, if you're going to the masjid, you might be late, you think to yourself, let me rush, I'm rushing to something good, right? And Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, compete when it comes to good. And in a general sense, the masjid, you will arrive on time and you will be in the right mindset that is required. There is a story that happened a few years ago now. It mentions that, and this is a true thing that was in the news, one of the mu'addin in Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, they have schedule who leads the salah and who gives adhan, and they will rotate and give people opportunity. So the story was that this one mu'addin, he gives the adhan at Masjid al-Haram, and he is actually an imam at one of the smaller masjids in Mecca. So he gives the adhan, and then he tries his best to reach the masjid where he is responsible to lead the salah. Now, what happened was he gave, and in order to reach the masjid, he was rushing. And perhaps by mistake, not knowing, we all make mistakes, he was rushing to get to the masjid in his car, and he got into an accident. And he ended up killing someone by accident. And this was big news a few years ago in Saudi, in Mecca. So again, it shows us just a very small glimpse, an example of the many benefits that the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, that when you come to the masjid, do so with this sakina. And that is not just the distance that you travel to the masjid, but it is also entering the masjid. Many times you hear people, they come into the masjid, sometimes you might hear them huffing and puffing, and you can hear the footsteps, right? And they rush. And there's a beautiful hadith that we've shared once before concerning a companion by the kunya Abu Bakr, Abu Bakrata. And this companion is not Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, it's a different companion. What he did was, he came into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and he saw the people in ruku'. He saw the people in ruku'. And we know that if you catch the prayer in ruku', then that rak'ah is valid. So you can imagine the companion entering from the entrance of the masjid, and he sees the people in ruku', and he goes, what he does is, without lining up in the sufuf, he goes into ruku'. As soon as he enters, he goes into ruku', and then he walks towards the line, and he joins the line. And now the Prophet ﷺ, after the prayer, he makes note of this, and he tells this companion, he says to him, he asks him a question saying, why did you do this? And the companion said, I did not want to miss out on the virtue, I wanted to catch that rak'ah. And the Prophet ﷺ tells him, زَادَكَ اللَّهُ حِرْصًا وَلَا تَعُدْ, meaning, may Allah Azza wa Jal increase you in wanting good, in the khair, but do not repeat it. And the scholars in Islam, they say, this shows us how beautiful the Prophet ﷺ was in his mannerism, when he would correct people, right? Today, if someone makes a mistake, we throw the whole book at them, and we, make fun of them, or we're shocked if someone does not know. And here you have the Prophet ﷺ, who is so soft and gentle with his companions. He's praising him, or making dua for him rather, concerning something that he did wrong. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he knows, or at the very least, he understands that the actions of the companions, it comes from good intention. Right? But at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ has a duty and obligation that he can't remain silent if someone makes a mistake. So you see the best way of correcting people. Today, when we correct people, how do we do? Many times we do it in order to make ourselves look better. Look, I have more knowledge than you. I have studied. I know Arabic. I know Quran. I know Hadith. You don't know these things, so come, let me teach you. But there are so many times, not just in the Sunnah, but in the Quran, in the stories of the people before us, that great men humbled themselves. The story of Musa alayhi salam with Khidr. Musa alayhi salam is not just anyone. Allah Azza wa Jalla himself tells us in the Quran, وَكَانَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَجِيهًا, that Musa alayhi salam in front of Allah, or with Allah, he is wajiha, someone that has a status, high status. Yet, even him, he had to humble himself when it came to knowledge. That Khidr had more knowledge than him. So this is just one of the side benefits concerning this point. Another point that we sometimes forget is when walking, it is actually from the Sunnah to take short steps. And this does not mean that we walk in a strange way where, we walk in a way where people look at us. What it means is that we do not walk too fast to the masjid, and we do not walk too slow. We walk in between. And there are many hadith that mention how for each step a person takes, there is reward. Not only is there reward, but sins are forgiven because of the steps. And the Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith that the prayer of a man in Jama'ah, it is more virtuous up to 25 times in this particular hadith. But it comes with conditions. And some of these conditions is that the person makes wudu and he makes a good wudu. فأحسن الوضوء ثم خرج إلى المسجد, and then he goes out to the masjid, and the only thing that makes him leave his house is the salah. He doesn't go to the masjid necessarily to meet people or to chat. He goes for the sake of salah. And the Prophet ﷺ is saying here that such a person does not take a step except that for each step he takes, he is elevated a rank, daraja. And a sin is forgiven each step he takes. And the malaika, the angels, they make dua for such a person, as long as he's in the place of prayer. And they say, Allahumma salli alayhi, Allahumma arhamhu, O Allah, shower this person with your mercy. So these are some of the hadith that the scholars mention when it comes to the dua. Once a person enters the masjid, they should do so with the right foot. This is well-known knowledge. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in his sharh of Sahih Muslim, he mentions that the scholars are all in agreement that it is preferred that you do all things that are good with your left hand or right foot, and everything else that is in terms of cleanliness or entering the washroom and so on, it is preferred to do it with the left hand or the left foot. Now, some of the scholars, they joke, or rather the dua, the Tullab al-Ilm, the students, and they say that a man once was smoking, two friends together, and one of them was smoking, wanted to correct his friend, and he said to him, don't smoke with your left hand, smoke with your right hand. Or vice versa, he was smoking with his right hand, and he said, no, don't smoke with your right hand, smoke with your left hand. And the joke here is that the person completely missed the point, that smoking in Islam is haram and not makruh, and should be left off. But coming back to that point, you enter the masjid with your right foot. You enter the masjid with your right foot, and there are specific hadith that mention the dua that you say when you enter the masjid. And some of them, or perhaps the most easiest one, is that you make dua asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His rahmah. Allahumma ftah li abwaba rahmatik. And there are other narrations that mention that you send peace and blessings upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. And the scholars, they mention these are valid narrations. So from the points of benefit is that when you make dua for rahmah entering the masjid, Allahumma ftah li abwaba rahmatik, by you coming to the masjid, if you were to ask someone, why do you come to the masjid? The answer should be, I come to pray my salah. Okay, so why do you pray your salah? You pray your salah because you want that mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the scholars in Islam, they say here, it is befitting that you make dua asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that mercy when you enter the masjid. And then when you leave the masjid, you ask for the bounties of Allah, of rizq. And we are in Islam encouraged to portion everything in our lives. We are actually taught that wahbaniyya, this seclusion that some people do, that they go into a place of worship, become a monk or something like that, and they seclude themselves from life in general and just dedicate their entire life for worship. This is not according to the Sunnah. There's that famous narration where Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, he saw that one man sitting in the masjid, and he saw him sitting in the masjid for a long time. And when he asked him, the man said, my brother is out working and I sit here in the masjid and I worship. And Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu instructed the man to go up and seek his sustenance. So in Islam, we strike a balance. We do not leave the masjid completely, and we do not leave the world completely. We find a balance in between. And the scholars in Islam, such as Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that the comparison of the masjid to the believer, it is like water to fish. Water to fish. If you take a fish out of water, it might be able to survive for a little bit, but all that time it will be suffocating and eventually it will die. The same thing with the Muslim. If you remove yourself from the masjid and you do not go to the masjid, you will see a change in your life. That is for certain. people who do not go to the masjid, might be that they come once in a while, but the longer you go without coming to the masjid, you will see that things will deteriorate slowly and slowly. To have a masjid in a community, it is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many communities, how many Muslims live, particularly in the West, and they do not have masajid? Right? They live in small communities. I'm sure many of you, you've traveled many parts of the world. And I remember myself in my upbringing, when we lived in Sweden, and we lived in a very small community. For a very long time there was no masjid. And the only thing that we had was a basement, literally a basement. You had to go down. It was a building with condos and so on, and then you had to go down into the basement, and that was not even our masjid. It was a place, a madrasa for the children. Saturdays and Sundays we used to get taught the Quran. Yet, subhanAllah, like with so many benefits and blessings, we take things for granted. And I have seen with my own eyes masajids that were closed, they opened up, and then communities neglected them. They neglected them either directly or indirectly. And after a few years, these masajids, they became empty. And it was only after they closed that people, understood the blessings of a masjid. And there is an authentic hadith that mentions a man at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. This man lived far away from the masjid. Yet he would walk to the masjid. And the companion that is narrating this hadith, he says in the beginning of the hadith, I do not know of anyone that lives farther away from the masjid than this man. This man lives very, very far away from the masjid. Yet he comes for the prayer walking. And people, they said, why don't you do one of two things? Either you buy some kind of animal, a camel or a horse or something, that you can travel to the masjid and back. He said, no, I prefer walking to the masjid. They said, okay, what about the second thing? They said, try to get a house, build yourself a place closer to the masjid, and then it's shorter for you and you can pray with ease. And the man, he said, no, I do not want to do that. He said, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to write for me reward for walking to the masjid and walking back to my house. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he heard this, he said that this man has been given both things that he prayed for, that he made dua for. One of the last points that we want to make in this section is that once a person enters the masjid, they should busy themselves with dhikr of Allah, praising and remembering Allah, whether it is by saying La ilaha illallah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, or Quran, which is the speech of Allah that is not created and it is the best form of dhikr, or prayer or any sort of remembrance of Allah. That should be the main focus. And the person should not dedicate their time in speech concerning the dunya. And this is something that we often fall into. And according to other hadith, it is not haram to speak about worldly matters inside the masjid, as long as the matters that you're speaking of is halal. If you have a conversation with someone and you ask them, how was your day, what did you do, and so on, these type of conversations, they're not haram. But they can become a form of distraction. So if a person, instead of them getting the maximum reward, the maximum benefit of being in the masjid, in the house of Allah, they spend most of their time chatting with this person, chatting with that person, they will find that even if they spend physically, let's say 4 hours, perhaps all they spent in dhikr and remembrance and dua and salah might be 30 minutes. And the rest was texting, being on your phone, doing this, doing that. And that is a loss of time. So inshallah, this serves as a simple introduction. What we'll go through is some of the fiqh rulings when it comes to specifically the tahiyyatul masjid, as scholars mentioned, the 2 rak'at that a person should pray when entering the masjid. And inshallah we will delve into that and other issues as well. And with that, inshallah, we will conclude. If any brothers or sisters have any questions concerning what we went through, now is the time to ask. And sisters can send their questions to the phone number 250-896-1388. Again, that's 250-896-1388. And they can send that in the form of a text message. There's one question that says, if a sister is on her in her period, menses, is she allowed to be in the masjid? Now, scholars in Islam, they have difference of opinion, but the jumhur, the majority of the scholars, they say that the woman should not come to the masjid during her menses, that she should wait until that period is over, and then she comes to the masjid. Some scholars, they say if there's no fear of any najasa, impurity, such as blood, contaminating the masjid, then she can come to the masjid. So there's difference of opinion on that. I would personally say that in that case, the woman should stay at home and then come to the masjid once that time is over. But if she does come to the masjid during that period, then that is a valid opinion among scholars as well. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Yes? Jazakallahu khairan. So the brother is asking a follow-up about this issue. If for Salatul Eid, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave a specific command requesting everyone to come out for Salatul Eid, even the young women to come out, and as long as the place is not contaminated. In some narrations it mentions that they would sit not at the place of the prayer, the musalla, but close to it, then that is acceptable. And Salatul Eid would be different because there's specific hadith that mention that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam requested them to come. Any other questions? Yes.
Would the Khalifa be recognized as the leader of Muslims, even if, like, if there was a Khalifa now, would he be recognized as the leader of Muslims? Yes.
Jazakallahu khairan. This is not really related to the class, but to answer the question, if there was a Khalifa that was just, that was appointed by the Muslim Ummah, then yes, it would be the case. However, today people, especially groups that are known as the Khawarij, the ISIS and the likes, they tend to speak about Khilafah, and they speak about the Khalifa, and they bring someone that is unknown, and they try to make it seem that it is a must for the Muslim Ummah to follow this individual, which is not the case right now. So this issue is difficult to just give a general answer. There are many details and specifics to it. I hope that makes some sense. Yes?
Coming back to the question about females in the masjid, is it purpose dependent? They're coming to the masjid to a speech or something, or for example, they're coming for social work, their kids are doing something in the masjid. Is it a difference?
Yes, Jazakallahu khairan. So the brother is asking about, is there a difference if the woman comes to the masjid for a social event and things like that? The main reason that women, especially back in the day, were recommended to stay at home during this period was because of those sanitary reasons. And obviously this was 1,400 years ago, so it was slightly different. And this is why the scholars today, because of the difference, they say that if things are, there's no fear of contamination in that sense, then they can come to the masjid for social events. So it all comes down to whether the masjid will be contaminated or not. If that is not the case, then some of the scholars have said yes. But obviously the woman, she does not pray, she does not touch the Quran during this time, physically touch, but even that is, there's difference of opinion among some scholars. So I hope that answers the question. Any questions? Yes?
For women in general, which is better for the women to pray at home or
Jazakallah khairan. So the brother is asking for women in general, which one is more virtuous, better for them to pray at home or to pray in the masjid. In a general sense, following the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ made it very clear that no man, not even the husband, is allowed to stop a woman or his wife or daughter to come to the masjid and pray in the masjid. And having said that, the Prophet ﷺ also made it clear that it is more virtuous for a woman to pray at home. So we say obviously the same way that the Prophet ﷺ said, but we also stress the fact that women coming to the masjid, it is permissible and sometimes it might be encouraged by some scholars if there's something important that is happening at the masjid, that the woman partakes and she takes part of the knowledge that is given. So to summarize, it is better for a woman to pray at home, and if she comes to the masjid, no one is allowed to stop her from praying at the masjid, and praying at the masjid has reward too, but praying at home is better. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Any other questions? So inshallah, with that we will conclude. Inshallah, we will resume next week. These classes are every Wednesdays from 6 to about 6:30, and we give time for questions and answers. So inshallah, I hope to see you then, and please encourage others to come and benefit. وجزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.